Welcome back, everyone, to the Toronto Area Region Virtual Speaker Series. Our apologies for starting a little bit late. We've had some technical issues, and we appreciate that you've been so patient. Our Virtual Speaker Series has been a bi-weekly event on Tuesday evenings from 7 to 8 p.m. since March the 10th, and we run until June 2nd. So this is our second last session, and we're glad that you joined us tonight. Please remember that you can join our conversation and ask questions via Twitter. Use the hashtag #eLearnAunt. And we'll be following through there. We'll be answering questions as we go along. Tonight's topic, we're very, very excited, is game-based learning and the gamification of education. We are lucky to have the world-renowned expert in this field, Dr. Jennifer Jenson, speaking with us tonight. And for those of you who are unaware of Dr. Jenson's background, she is a professor of pedagogy and technology in the Faculty of Education, and she's the director of the Institute for Research on Learning Technologies at York University. She is currently co-editor of Loading, the Journal of Canadian Game Studies Association, and she's the past president of the Canadian Game Studies Association. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jennifer Jenson and say welcome. There you go, Jennifer. And we seem to have lost... Are you there, Jennifer? Are you good? We seem to have lost Jennifer again. We'll give her a minute to regroup. She is in British Columbia, and so I know she's working hard to connect with us. We had her there a few minutes ago. Again, I want to say that this is our second last session, and I saw Jennifer's just popped out, so she'll just reload. And we hope that you join us for our last session on June the 2nd. We're going to have Dr. Chris Deedy and Dr. Heidi Larson presenting. They're going to be presenting on a little bit about online environments and then on scale, how to move projects like this forward, what we can be doing to support that. So that'll be an exciting time as well. And I know Dr. Deedy is going to be sending out a link ahead of time. He's wanting to do a little bit of a flipped classroom approach, so we will get that out to you as soon as possible. The other thing, while I'm waiting on Dr. Jenson to join us again, is we would hope that you'd be joining us in our online e-learning community. We do post all of our challenges there, as well as keeping the conversation going using the hashtag #eLearnAunt. So we think it's been a great session so far, minus the technical glitches, but certainly everyone who'd be viewing, I'm sure, would be aware that these are the things that we work hard to overcome, and it's just like in the classroom. Things happen, and you make do with what you can. So I'm waiting on Dr. Jenson to return. I'm not seeing anything, and my colleagues there are remaining very silent. Was there anything else that you wanted to add? Do we know what Osamuk is doing this evening or anything while we wait on Dr. Jenson? And Andy, I can see your mouth moving, but your microphone is off.
Story of my life. Okay, so I just want to know if Donna Fry is out there right now and she's watching with Osamuk, if she can put in the hashtag right now. Maybe we can get that out there if there is something going on afterwards on that one.
I'm not seeing much. Gotta love it.
Oh, there we go. So we got a message from Regan right now that there is no Osamuk for tonight.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. So Patrick, while we're waiting on the back channel, have you been able to connect with Jen?
I'm not seeing Jennifer here. Let me try her by phone. So I'll mute my mic and turn it over to you, Andy, for a minute or two while I give her a quick call.
Sure. Okay, here we come. Patrick, here we come.
That's me calling you, Jennifer. So you're back? Oh, you're back and you're frozen again.
Frozen again.
Are you there, Jennifer? Uh, hello? Uh, I don't even have her on the phone anymore. Um, so this is unfortunate. We'll try one more time. Um, and then if need be, certainly if Jennifer could share her slides with me, I'm sure we could present and we can get her to do some voiceover uh, work as well. So Jennifer was just indicating that she doesn't know why she's having the problem, so she's going to move so she has a better connection, hopefully. And just like I can see her, Regan is posting in their back channel that she's being kicked out as well. So I'm not really sure what the problem is this evening. Jennifer says she'd be about less than 5 minutes to regroup. So I'd be looking.
Patrick, is she able to do that by phone with you then, or with the slides, or is she going to try to?
She thinks she's going to forward me her slides, but she thinks that if she moves, she'd have a better chance of getting actually the connection to work better.
Maybe while we're waiting, maybe people can tweet what their favorite part of our Be the Game Changers sessions have been so far. Maybe we can have a conversation about that while we wait for kind of our technical difficulties to be fixed.
That'd be great. The other question that they might want to share with us is whether we should try this again. This was certainly something brand new for us. We'd love to get your feedback on whether we should continue next year, new speakers, or whether you've got ideas for moving forward.
And maybe we can even start asking the question, how do you feel about game-based learning? Does it really engage students? Do you feel like it gives students more choice and lets them have a voice? If you do, maybe you can share and tweet out some of your favorite apps or games that you like your students to use. Maybe we can start having a bit of a sharing session while we wait as well. And great resources.
But with that, do Andy or Shelley, do either of you play games? I know I recently took a course at York University, and one of our units was on game-based learning and games, and we had to go and play games. I myself am not a big gamer, although I have to say that logging in and learning, I played the game World of Warcraft as an experience. It was certainly a fun experience for me, but I'm curious, do either of you play games?
You know, I myself do not, but you know, Patrick, one of the things that I hear teachers talk about, and if you've taken it, maybe you can comment a little bit on the gamification versus the game-based learning. Because I know some of your team I was talking a little bit about that a little while back about the difference between the two, and kind of commenting on one versus the other. Because I think people seem to blend the two things together and think it's the same thing, but they really are two different things, right? So.
That's right. I know that Jennifer Jenson, when she joins us, will be able to distill the differences and to explain how and when we should be applying each. You know, in my board, that certainly has been a topic of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I know in my board, a big thing is Minecraft. There's a kind of a big movement around that. And at my house, I have a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old that are crazy for Minecraft, and the things that they create in there, from, you know, storybooks that they've read. They've created whole storybook settings, to showing what they understood from something that they've done at school. So I can see how that can translate into this other kind of Minecraft world. Also, Annie Slater, who is a VP in TDSB, they had a chat on the weekend on Twitter, and one of the games she suggested, she said that her daughter was really frustrated kind of with math drills and things like that she was having at school, and one of the apps that she suggests is called Math Zombies, and it's a game for the iPads. And she said she just absolutely loves it. It took that boring drill of something that, you know, was on paper and very boring, no challenge, and kind of changed the same kind of drills that she would be doing, but kind of twisted it into a different way that it was a challenge for her then. Mm-hmm. So I could see kind of the connections on how to take the ordinary and kind of in a way make them extraordinary. That kind of explains it.
Mm-hmm. We too, on our board, we're seeing a bit of a movement for more people are playing Minecraft in the classroom, and I think that I saw one come up here from one of our teachers, one of our tech coaches, does some great things in this classroom with Vicky Morgado, and she's talking here about gaming engages many of the most reluctant learners. She's got a blog there, so if you're on following the eLearn hashtag on Twitter, you might want to click on that and read some of her blogs on and how being able to utilize Minecraft to not just engage the students, but ensure that we're covering the curriculum at the same time, and just to activate some learning in the classroom a little more interactive.
I think that's one of the keys. I think often we think of, when I think of classroom teachers, we've always used games. We've always tried to make it a fun, enjoyable experience to help cover curricular expectations. But I think that the power of technology has enhanced that when well thought out. I think that there are time and place for certain things. Minecraft being one of those in our board that we're seeing great success with. And so certainly we've enjoyed having that. We've had presentations and lots of professional development around that. We've also had some other games, some of which are more sort of the drill type games that Shelley referred to earlier, and some of the more on the other end, we've got other games that are more Twine being one of them, sort of that virtual creation to help students with literacy skills, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And with that, I see Dr. Jennifer Jenson is back. You look like you're outside, so I hope this is a better connection, Dr. Jenson. Oh, now there's no sound. Are you there? She says yes, she is, but I cannot hear her. So we'll give her a minute there to work on that. And I'm just here, 7 new results on Twitter. Keep moving from Pioneer to Civil. Use of Minecraft. Donna Fry's talking about Minecraft. Vicky Morgado that you mentioned there. Google Spreadsheets badges are very successful from Denise Boutnar. My apologies if I've said your name incorrectly. Socrative and Get Kahoot. Kahoot is one that's covered we've seen it throughout our board as well, and that's from Mario Stamagna. Kahoot, I've used Kahoot myself with some presentations, and I'm always amazed. We think of games being engaging for students, but really as teachers, when I'm running professional development, they love Kahoot as well. It's a great way to start the session and get them engaged and participating. And I'm looking, Jennifer, can we hear you yet? I still cannot hear you, Jennifer. We'll give you 1 second. I will call Jennifer, and maybe we can get some audio from there, and we can get her to do her presentation. So I'm going to mute out, and I'm going to turn over to Andy and Shelley for another minute. Thank you.
No, I know that she's going to be touching upon it. We talk about the game-based learning, but the gamification, how one is actually the game itself, and the other one is integrating game-type components into non-game situations in the classroom. And we find that people are often having success in those areas as well, just to kind of engage the kids and challenge thought, reward system, badge system, and things like that, which I think is an exciting thing too in the class to just keep the kids motivated and engaged.
Yeah, and I think just having the voice, I think, for students. I think some students struggle when it's, the typical assignment that's, pen to paper. They struggle with getting their answers out. They struggle with showing the evidence of their learning. But giving them another outlet to do that, like Minecraft or another kind of gamification type of platform, just helps people to express what they know and gives students the choice to get their voice. Oh, I think maybe Jennifer's ready. Okay, Jennifer. So. Yay!
Can you hear me now?
We can. Yay!
Great. Sorry, everyone, and for the technical difficulties. You're probably hearing ambient noise because I'll just turn the camera around, and you can see that I am by the ocean, so I'm probably going to be your most bizarre speaker, speaking from the weirdest place.
Nice.
So thanks everyone for your patience, and I'm really super delighted to be speaking to everyone tonight, and from what seems like now the wilds of British Columbia. Where I wanted to start was just with thanking Patrick for putting all of this together and and inviting me to speak to you tonight. I guess where I want to start is by talking a little bit about my own work and how long I've been doing this, and then take you through some of the things that I think are problematic about games and video game culture in general, and then end off by talking about two things that are close to my own heart. How can we actually study games in the classroom, and what are we going to do with them? And to talk to you a little bit about gamification. So in order to do that, I will share my screen and just kind of get started. I would love any hand waving or anything else at me, and ask me questions anytime. I will pause, and I will keep it short since everyone's been on the hook for half an hour now. And here we go. So where I really most wanted to start was to talk to you about the kinds of ways I've been thinking about games and game-based learning for a while, and to start kind of from the other way around, and that's from thinking about design and how we design educational games that are for educational purposes. And this is really where I started. I started from the other way around, and then I started asking questions about commercial video games. But all of this came from deep questions that, for me anyway, came out of work that Marshall McLuhan did and has done for ages and ages. Even though he's dead, his work is closest to my heart. And what he's talked about was that, at least in the 20th century, our classrooms really did look like they did many, many years ago in the 19th century. And if we kind of pull this forward, we know that many of our high school, college, and university classrooms look like this. And so for me, it's a provocation to think about what can a classroom look like that would look differently, and what do our own classrooms look like. And we kind of changed the nature of the classroom, and I'm going to talk about this more towards the end. But we took a classroom that looked not quite like this, but very familiarly, you know, oriented to the teacher and to the pedagogue, and turned it into something that looked a little bit like this, with kids working together around a problematic and around a set of questions and around a game. And this led me to think about, well, how do we do this in a way that helps people to understand that it's not just games that hack the space. It can be anything that we do. And games are just one of those things that help us do that. And they help us do it really well, I think, because games evoke this a pleasurable, most of the time, response. And so they give us a really lovely into talking about how we can change what we're doing, what classrooms might look like. I mean, I think that we shouldn't necessarily be asking what 21st century classrooms should look like or could look like, since we already are well into the 21st century. And we kind of know that we still have this perennial problem. That means we're right back here. This is familiar territory. So video games, I think they help us. They can help us have a different look to our class, a different look and feel. And in saying that, I don't want to sound like I'm rah, 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 all video games are great. Really, I don't think all video games are great, and I don't think all video games are necessarily appropriate for classroom consumption, if you will. So I'm just going to back up and talk to you a little bit about this seamy underbelly of video game culture, in order to talk to you about how I think we need to intervene in the lives of our students around this problematic in a really, what we know, a familiar media literacy kind of way. So I'm just going to play this little video. Any questions at this point? Okay. Hopefully the video will play. If it doesn't, you'll get the picture without watching the video because the sound is so obnoxious. Come on. This is a video that was produced by PlayStation 4 advertisers. Which I don't know if you can hear. Probably you can't.
But if you send me the link, Jennifer, I can certainly upload it to our environment.
I'll send it to you. Okay, so I'll skip ahead. Basically, it's this really jerky-looking guy who's talking about playing the PlayStation 4, but as if with all of these very direct sexual innuendos. And it was such a terrible marketing campaign. It aired in Europe that it was off the air within a week. But my point is, why would you ever go there? So in terms of who games, I just wanted to take you through the latest bit of stats. Pretty much a lot of us do. And if you note here, the 48% of women say that they've played a computer game or video game in the past 4 weeks. That number really hasn't changed in the last 10 years. Women have been saying that they've played quite a lot over quite a long period of time. This is a breakdown by age who's played a video game in the past 4 weeks, and I think what's really important here is that 13 to 17-year-old range. They're reporting more video game play than the core demographic, which is the 33-year-old player. Again, here's something that I think is really important. What they did is they broke out age by game type or genre, and children 5 to 12 years of age who were female reported playing kid role-playing games, and boys reported playing action and adventure games. In teen years, though, the play by females drops off quite considerably to 27%, and 53% of boys in the 13 to 17-year-old age category report exclusively playing shooter games. And I'm going to return to this, but I think it's a very important thing to note, because most of the shooter games that they claim they're playing are rated immature, which means that they should not be playing those games without adult supervision, and in fact, the video game industry recommends that they are not to play those games. And then this sort of breaks out again by adults 18 to 34 years old. A lot of men are playing RPGs and more women are playing puzzle games, and by this you can read Candy Crush. And same with females, adults 35 to 54. And now we have the return of the shooter game demographic in the 35 to 54-year-old range for men. So what does this tell me, and what should it tell you? That at least the very large video game industry that is making these very large titles, they're putting a lot of their money, their energy, and their efforts into getting this male player population to buy shooting games. And how do we know that? Taking a look at April, just last month's top video game sales, we have Mortal Kombat 10, Grand Theft Auto in the top 2, Call of Duty's there. And of this list, in terms of what we could recognize as educational, only Minecraft really would be on my list of things that you could play. So again, when we're looking at the commercial industry, we're looking at an industry that isn't necessarily school-friendly. This is just a little screen grab from Mortal Kombat, another one from Grand Theft Auto that the developer themselves put out. So we have a problematic, and the problematic is that very much video games are still about the boys. And how do we know this? Because they're catered to all the time. And this core demographic is catered to. So what's super contradictory here is that almost half of women and girls report that they play video games, and yet most game marketing and people getting the most press coverage are male and male players. So before I go too much further, I want to talk about violence in video games from two sides. One is the in-game violence that we hear a lot about, including the stuff that shows up in Grand Theft Auto and screenshots like this guy with a baseball bat, but also that shows up in mainstream press, where we hear about people who do bad things who've also been playing shooter video games. So this is literature that is still very much controversial. It comes out of media effects literature that in television has basically gone nowhere over 40 years. And the same thing is happening with video games. This is from 2014, a study that found that playing violent video games makes us more aggressive. And just a study from last week that concludes that there's no evidence that violent video games make children aggressive. So we have a lot of contradictory information here about what does or does not make you violent in terms of playing these violent video games. But it is a conversation that needs to be had, and it's one of those things that kind of gets swept under the rug all the time. And it's something that, for me, in order to talk about video games at school, it is something that needs to be brought up. So that's the in-game violence, that's the media effects literature. Now, on the other side is a phenomenon that's been going on for quite some time, and I'm going to slow down here a little bit because I know I've been talking really quickly, and ask people if who knows about Gamergate? I'll just wait. Gamergate? Okay, good. So the Gamergate is a phenomenon that started in about August of 2014 that circulated initially around this young woman who's a game designer. And she published a game called Depression Quest. It's a Twine-based game, so it's a narratively driven game. And her ex-boyfriend, excuse me, went a bit crazy, off the rails, published some really nasty stuff about her online. And it sort of opened up this festering thing that had been happening both in the industry and in-game culture whereby an anonymous horde of hatred was being lobbied at female designers, female video game critics, and feminist video game academics. And one of those people is Anita Sarkeesian, who runs a blog called Feminist Frequency. I'm not going to show you it. You can go look it up. But it's a very good blog. It's a very good critique of video games and gender, and very much worth taking a look at. She was so harassed and has been such a public spokesperson that she was named one of Time's 100 most important people this year. So this is all to say this was a very big phenomenon. It meant that people's home addresses and their phone numbers were posted online, almost all entirely female. And it was a real hate campaign against women designers, women critics, women journalists. And part of this came out of a sort of building frustration that we were seeing, and a project of mine was noting, of male players and male developers who were feeling as if, not all of them, but some of them, as if they were being encroached upon. And so I'm going to just flip through the next two slides really quickly, but I wanted to show you what this looks like, this kind of harassment. And this is from 2011. This is someone who's playing Call of Duty, a woman, and this is the kind of thing that happens to her when she's online. The next one I'm going to be even faster about, but this is from, it's actually a glorified of a week in the life of Anita Sarkeesian's very bad Twitter account, because people are threatening her all the time. So part of why this is happening is because of a kind of ghettoization of female players into this area of pinkness, into quote-unquote appropriate titles like babysitting or Barbie, or a very interesting, a series from Ubisoft called Imagine. It's also because women are in general marginalized in the games themselves, so we only have 15% of game characters that are female. We have very conventional female character design, and very obvious female character design, hypersexualized, hyperfeminized. And where we get that in male characters, we do get a little bit more choice. So we kind of get the weakling here, and we go into this beefy guy, but in the very same game, we basically have 3 different sizes of exactly the same figure and type and everything else. And all of this is to say that we can't just simply pick up commercial off-the-shelf video games and throw them into a classroom and not deal with these problematics. And I will include that in Minecraft, in using Minecraft, and I would include that in anything that you're using that heralds and hails this kind of marginalization. And it happens all the time, and it happens regardless of your age or your grade. Just a little anecdote. Recently just completed a study that was focused on having kids design games from a producer-like relation, and just finished looking at the attitudinal surveys that we gave kids, and both girls and boys said that they mostly played sort of along similar lines. But when we were looking at attitudes towards whether or not they felt like they could problem solve on computers, or whether they felt like they could take a bit of software and fix the problem, almost all of the girls indicated that they maybe could not. And all the boys were on the other side, they maybe could, or they definitely could. So this is a kind of ongoing, perennial problem that we have, a very distinct gender divide, and computer games actively reinforce, even though we don't want them to, this kind of cultural and social stereotype. So then I guess the question is, why would we use video games at all? And my answer is that play is central to how we learn, and video games are capturing and holding the attention of players, as we can see by the stats here. You know, 81% of 13 to 17-year-olds said that they played a video game in the past 4 weeks. So what might we learn through playing games? We might learn something about a narrative, an interactive narrative with consequences, because games have an artificial intelligence, and they have rules, and the rules respond to what you do. That kind of interactivity, the you do something and the game does something to you, can mean that we also have consequences in what we're doing. They're also beautifully immersive environments. You get to dwell in a place that you would never be able to be, and to explore that place. This is a screen grab from Assassin's Creed that was set, the one that was set in Venice, and it's a stunningly beautiful game. There's also some beautiful games. This is a screen grab from Machinarium that embed puzzle solving, and you play as a robot who can't talk, and you're solving puzzles as you go along. They also have a few games have an emotional register to them for some people. And when they did the reboot or rewriting of the Lara Croft series, that game elicited for some players some very visceral reactions that we hadn't really seen before necessarily in the regular kinds of games that we go through. They also give, in addition, a chance to role and act, taking on an identity that otherwise wasn't or isn't accessible, like a space captain or like a gay space captain. And this kind of role-playing is something that we're hearing from players that they want to do more and more. There's also user-generated content, as we know very well from Minecraft, but user-generated content has been around for quite a long time, and is something that has hailed different kinds of players and users. There's also, games are beautiful at putting you in a multimodal environment with text, with video, with a 3D or a semi-faux 3D world. And they teach you, this is a screen cap from Eve, how to read these complex scores where action and text and talk even is going on. They also help you to support and develop a technical register. James Paul G talks about this as the ability that games give kids the ability to access basically a higher order discourse around a particular kind of, it could be a sports, it could be Yu-Gi-Oh, and to practice that specialized discourse in meaningful ways, and in a community that actually polices those discursive boundaries in a very effective ways. And this is exactly what we do when we as teachers read about pedagogy, or as physicists we read research on physics, etc. So this is, G argues that this is the kind of thing that we want kids to be able to do. And for some, although it's usually the other way around, it allows kids to practice English and or to practice in a second language. So that's sort of the larger landscape of what video games might do. And I'm just going to show you a little bit about what happens quite often in games and education. We don't do this so great. That we had to redo Oregon Trail in 2009 tells me that we still haven't really quite gotten there in terms of particularly focused educational games. And part of the reason we're not there yet is we continue to helicopter in content from whatever curricular area we're trying to get across, rather than have the content and the rule structure and everything else be endogenous to what we're doing. And this, I really like this example because it's so clear. We have a card game and we have the food pyramid, and food pyramids have nothing to do with card games, nor does a pyramid and putting stuff, you know, sorting stuff have anything to do with that either. And we see this quite a lot in Also in math games, I'm not sure what a pizza has to do, or a Flaming Frank with a happy hamburger. But these are the kinds of things that we keep reproducing in education. This is one of my favorite examples as well. It comes from the website for the Nobel laureates, and they create games. And this one you might think is called Monkey Mayhem. So you could just guess what this is about. I'm sure everyone's thinking it's about the periodic table, and you would be right. But what a monkey has to do with the periodic table, I still don't know, and the game doesn't work. So this is sort of what I mean by the content being exogenous to the gameplay, to the setting of the game, to what the game's about. And we keep kind of stumbling over this in our educational games. And in some of the game designs that I've done, I've really tried to break this cycle with more and less success. It's not as easy to do as you might think. But one little game that I think does it quite well comes from Global Kids and Game Lab. It's been out there for a while. It still works. It's called AIDA, The Cost of Life, and it's a resource management game where basically you learn that no matter what you do, you can't get your character to go to school full time because the cost of life exceeds what your access to education. And it makes that point really, really well. And there's a bunch of other small games out there like this, and increasingly more as access to game making tools has become more democratized, easier, more user friendly, etc. So that's my little bit about educational games, and it doesn't lead perfectly well into my critique of gamification, but here we go.
You get there, Jennifer.
Yeah.
You've covered a ton of information, so thank you for that.
Good.
I know that there have been some questions then, and you may be getting here, so if you are, just let us know. But you've talked about some of the qualities of games that you think we should be looking for, but are there good games you would recommend? Is there a starting point for a game for a teacher to use? Is there what should be the path that a teacher follows to selecting the right game, if such a thing exists?
Thanks, Patrick. And actually, I'll say that I think that you can use some of the commercial off-the-shelf games. I would suggest Gone Home. It's a beautiful game, and it does a very, very good job. It's narratively driven. It has a very poignant storyline. So there are games out there. One of the games that we've used, and we just finished it in a study, and I'll just show you a screen grab of it, is called Lost Winds Winter of the Melodias. It's a Zelda-like game. But what I want to say about games is that as teachers, we are the pedagogues, and I think that one of the things that we can think about when we're using them, well, two things. One is you have to play them. So you can't use something that you haven't necessarily played. You need to be able to at least make your way a little bit through it. But you don't have to play to the end anymore. And there are lovely websites out there called Let's Play videos that show you the entire game played through. And so the responsibility, the onus of playing through that 20 to 40-hour game is no longer on you. And you can use games like Gone Home, which doesn't take 20 hours, or like there's a beautiful arts-like game called Journey. And you can use these games as starting pieces, as starting points to talk about video game consumption, to talk about media literacy in relation to games, to talk about, who in your class is, I mean, I just did this the other week. How many grade 6 boys put up their hand when I asked, what were they playing, and they said Call of Duty, was at least 3/4 of the boys. So I think it's not so much about the game, it's about the curriculum that you create around it. And I think that you can effectively use shorter, longer, not the entire game, to drive home a point, even if you want. I mean, sometimes games break. Sometimes they don't work for everyone, and for kids to experience that is also something very useful. So I guess that's a long-winded answer, and I'd say I would choose the game that best suits whatever curricular area you are working within. If you're doing language arts, look for some more narrative stuff. If you're doing physics, there's some really terrible physics games out there, but there are some that have fantastic physics in them that you can discuss, and you don't have to play them for very long.
Jen, if you're there, it's Andy. I have a question for you. And is there, and I'm watching through the Twitter chats right now, is there a time where when a teacher's bringing the games into the classroom, is there, what's the sweet spot, and sort of how do you know when you're playing the right amount and you're not doing overkill, but you're not going too light, you're not getting the most out of the students? Let's say you've identified a handful of kids in the class that do like games. Again, how do you find that sweet spot, or how would you know when it's too much or too little?
That's a really fantastic question, and you know what I would say is you learn by experimenting. This is not something where we have one tried and true answer for, and unfortunately, some things lend themselves to short bursts, other things don't. And what I like to think about is that games are one resource in a toolkit of available and accessible, increasingly accessible technology resources that actually effectively hook someone that you might not think is going to be hooked, or they allow competencies from students who may not display them in any other way. And briefly, just a quick anecdote, we did do the Last Win study. And one of the things that was most surprising for the teachers who helped and participated in the study, for them was that the students in their class who actually had, fewer resources, didn't read as well, some of them turned out to be the best gamers. And they actually were able to help other kids for the first time in their entire classroom experience in that class. So I think it takes experimentation. I think it takes allowing yourself to fail. Games are great at letting you fail. You just try over, and it takes a willingness to not everything works the first time around. I think it takes a willingness to experiment.
That was great. Now, I interrupted you. So if you wanted to get back to, just as a reminder, I think you were just starting into your critique of the game-based learning.
Yeah, it's just a gamification, and I'll be really fast on it.
No, we've got, you're good, so you're doing great. I'm learning a lot, so thank you.
Okay. So, I mean, I use this in sort of just the stars sticker slide, but schools have always done some form of gamification. We have library contests, we have sticker contests, we have teachers who gave stars for performance, for all kinds of things. We've done this. We know how to do this really well, but not in the way that I think we're being pushed into doing it. I think that there's two technologies out there right now that really are trying to gamify stuff, and although I know that they work for a lot of people, I think that they still are very much the star and badge system, and Moto is one, Class Dojo is the other. I mean, I really don't know how these, I mean, they're cute, but I don't know how they make it easy for students to stay alert and on task. And I think these are claims that are being driven from a desire to keep kids engaged with technologies that they understand. But we've always done and always been using these technologies. It's just that they migrated to phones or something else. And what I like to think about instead of gamification of education, I like to think about gameful design or a gameful curriculum. In other words, to use, to use the Latin word for play, to have some ludic forms available to kids to make their way through curriculum. Because here's the killer about games and learning. A very large meta review on games and learning in 2012 entitled "Your Princesses in Another Castle" says, there is limited evidence to suggest how educational games can be used to solve the problems inherent in the structure of traditional K-12 schooling. If you are looking for data to support that argument, then we are sorry, but your princess is in another castle. So the point here is that the jury is still out on whether or not we can recognize the kinds of learning, the kinds of what counts as knowledge through these ludic forms. And so in the research that I've been doing, we've been really, for a very long time, and with some fantastic folks at PL2 helping, trying to figure out what do kids learn when they're playing? What knowledge structures are available to them? What resources do they uptake? And just briefly, I'm going to touch on the pilot to the study that I mentioned and the study that we did as a way of kind of wrapping this up. In winter of last year, we decided to take up this challenge of narrative learning in video games, and we experimented with a group of volunteers from grade 6 and their teacher who was willing to stay, give up her lunchtime to help supervise. And we thought, let's just stick them on Zelda and see how they experience this game. Do they experience it as a narrative? The pilot study ran for quite a long time. We gave them a pre-test to determine whether or not they had any pre-existing knowledge of Zelda, and then we also gave them a post-test to see what they remembered about the quote-unquote narrative of the game, and we did exit interviews to find out what they thought, what they could remember. And what was really interesting about this is I talk to adults all the time. They talk to me about their kids playing Zelda. I talk to my friends about our Zelda play, and they always say, oh, Zelda, it's so great because of the narrative. But what we found is that the kids in this study were not engaging with the narrative. They were just focused on the play-based elements. They skipped all of the story. They were not interested in the story at all. And we tried. We gave them iPads so they could look at walkthroughs. We had them look at Let's Play videos so they could see where they got stuck. And as a standalone activity, we were really super successful in proving that you can't add video games in stereo. You have to scaffold it to keep focused on the game as a kind of text. So what we decided we'd do is we would embed, and we couldn't use Zelda, but we'd embed a Zelda-like game in the full study and see when we embedded it what happened. And we're just kind of sifting through the data now. But preliminarily, a few things that were really interesting, at least from my standpoint, came out. One is that even though the students who participated in the study, even though they were concerned a lot like the previous students in the pilot with getting on with the game, with completing the tasks that were set for them, because we kept drawing them back, asking them questions about what was going on, asking them questions about the elements of the story, asking them questions about the setting, etc. They really did interact with it because of that scaffolding, as if there were a story to be told. And how we know this is that we asked them to write a journal or a letter to as embodying the main character in the game to their mother who was missing in the game. And we got really great, very accurate for the most part, accounts of what their life had been like, you know, who they'd been battling in the game, etc., up to date. And then we also got very accurate information back off the students when we asked them questions about the setting, when we asked them questions about who the hero was and who the anti-heroes were. So we were really enthusiastic about this, and we're enthusiastic to see a bit more when we're going through the data this summer, whether and how the kids did on their pre and post test. And what's encouraging for me about this is that we at least put a container around a game implementation project with a curriculum that's together that we can hand off to other classroom teachers. And so to go back to your other question, Patrick, I do know, at least as far as this game goes, that it works over a 2-week period, and that it's a reasonable amount of time for most students in the class to complete the game, which gives them a very, very great sense of, completion. For some, they end up doing a lot of helping because they're done earlier, etc. So I'm happy to share that with anyone who wants it. And I'll just sort of end with a few takeaway points that I wanted to touch on and can talk around too. So at least for right now, learning when it comes to video games might well just be about learning about the game. And I have a lot of evidence for this in my own studies. A lot of the times the kids can tell us a lot about the game, and transference to other contexts, not necessarily, but that's one of our oldest problems in education, so maybe that's not necessarily something we need to expect from video games, because we certainly can't expect it in a lot of the other stuff we do. I really truly believe that video games are not the answer to solving problems in education, but are one of many tools, and I think they're a tool that right now very much speaks to this generation of learners. Not all of them understand it, but a lot of them do, and a lot of them unexpectedly succeed at it as just another, tool in this toolkit. I think as educators, and I hinted at this when I talked about game culture, we need to be talking more to students about the games they play and why, and how they feel games are important or not. I don't think we do enough of the media literacy, well, we do very little around games. And I think it could be one of the more interesting places that we could go to in future, especially as you don't necessarily have to play the games anymore in order to critique them. There are so many people who have posted online they're playing all the way through some of these very long and very technically challenging games. Doesn't mean we can't critique them. I would encourage us not to think about gamification, but instead to think of instructional and design strategies to support learning differently through gaming, through gamifying stuff, but not necessarily through making everything into a badge or a star. And I just want to finish up by saying I believe that games are a very interesting experimental medium that capture and hold the attention of this generation, and are therefore very much worthy of our attention because they're holding, the attention of this generation. Just thinking of all those kids who spend hours and hours watching Minecraft videos, that's holding their attention. And as educators, we need to look where their attention is being held. So thank you.
There we go. That's great, Jen. Thank you very much for that. And Patrick, if you just give a nod, if it's okay, if I can ask a question over here. Okay, great. So one of the last slides you had, Jen, if I can just get some clarity on something. We hear about the game-based learning versus the gamification, and within the game-based learning, there are components of gamification about reward systems. You called it the badge system, and the trial and the engagement and whatnot. And we link that. I'm going back to the gamification. You had a quote up there to think of more in instructional design. I think that's great. With instructional design, we often think of it as, I also think of things like cooperative learning and other kinds of strategies in the classroom. The gamification, or does it not have its own set of criteria and saying if I'm going to gamify my instructional design without a video game, but going to say, okay, I'm going to teach my kids, I'm making this up now, a math lesson, and I'm going to look at ways of drawing that out to kind of have them come up with their own challenge thought, have them kind of all the components of what you would call the game-based learning in it. Is that a wrong way to say it? If someone says, what is your instructional design? I said, well, I'm gamifying my math lesson in the context of a face-to-face situation. And gamification is just kind of wrapping it up as to a criteria as an instructional strategy.
I wouldn't say there's a wrong way. I mean, I think that we know that for some gamification really works. That there are people for whom that actually hooks into the a reward structure that they want, or a punishment structure, because it's not just rewarding, right? The gamification is that you also see where you're failing as well. So I wouldn't say it's wrong. I'm just trying to shift the conversation away from what feels like a kind of trivial surface level engagement to gamifying everything. Let's talk Foursquare if you want. To a conversation that talks about exactly where you ended up. Instructional strategies that use gamey pieces, if you want, ludic pieces, but aren't, but haven't necessarily, or are using them for a reason, are using them because of, maybe a diverse student body in front of them, or to team build, or to collaboratively build people across these kinds of things. So I think I don't think there's necessarily right, wrong. I just want to shift that conversation a bit because the gamification stuff feels on the trivial side, and I really don't think that's what we're doing. A lot of us, when we're doing this in education, I think we're doing this for really very important reasons, or sometimes just because we need something to, keep some of these folks over there on track, and it works.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's what I was saying. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Patrick? It's on mute. Patrick, I think it's on mute still.
There we go. So there we go. I didn't see any other questions, and I'm looking to Andy there. Did you see any other questions at this point?
No, just a lot of great comments going back, some great feedback going back and forth through the Twitter chats, which is fantastic. So some great conversations, echoing what Jen has been saying.
Perfect. So with that, then I guess I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Jennifer Jenson for helping us in expanding our understanding of game-based learning and I'll use the word, Jennifer, gamification of education. And I wanted to say I loved your quote that not everything works the first time around, that it takes a willingness to experiment. And I think this really is what the virtual speaker series is about, and certainly we needed that tonight as we work through some of our technical issues. So thank you for being so accommodating and willing to move to the outdoors. It must be hard to focus when you're out there. As Andy pointed out, it was a great conversation, and thank you very much to everyone for sharing. With that in mind, I want to remind everyone that our e-community is there, and we want to keep the conversation going, both in the e-community and through Twitter. So use the hashtag #eLearnAunt. In e-community, you can find some challenges that Jennifer has posed. These include things such as finding out what your students are playing some games yourself, and sharing some game-based resources that you can use in your classroom. So we certainly encourage you to keep it going and to do that. Additionally, we have information on the upcoming speakers. The date and topic is listed there, and we hope that this will help to move forward with teaching and learning practices in your classroom. We'll be sharing the video from tonight's session in the e-community as well, and so it's there for you to review and access at a later time in case you wanted to go over some of those slides or you wanted to think about what Jennifer had said. Thank you very much to everyone for being here, and please join us on June 2nd for the next Game Changer Speakers series. Dr. Chris Deedy and Heidi Larson will be speaking about change and scale. And with that, Jennifer, go and enjoy the British Columbia scenery. I can't believe that's where you're at tonight and you're having to work with us. It looks beautiful. So thank you very much for sharing tonight.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks for your patience.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.